We just wrapped up watching the series, limited series, from what we've been told up to this point, of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm Andrew. This is Adam. Adam over here is a hardened veteran in the world of sci-fi, particularly Star Wars. If you loved this show, he's probably going to nitpick, and we're going to work together to make sure he doesn't get out of control with it. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Adam, it's finally here. It was originally supposed to be a feature-length film, I think, originally, but it's a TV series. That seems to be the way of things in the world of Star Wars. Was it a good series? Did it need to be made? How do we feel about Vader and Obi-Wan and the revival of these characters and these actors? We have a lot to talk about.
You left a lot of questions there. Was it done well? Did it need to be made? Did it need to be made? My answer's always been the same, which is no, it did not need to be made. Was it made well? Yeah, there were parts that were not made well, like a chase in the woods, chasing a little girl.
Leia catches everyone off guard by just taking off with a rate of acceleration I'd describe as neutral. Oh, I'm not familiar with that scene.
Yeah, I was worried about this series being made, and how it would affect the canon from the original 1977 movie. When Vader and Obi-Wan encounter each other on the Death Star, Vader says the circle is now complete.
When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Which would work great where they left off in episode 3 to episode 4. But I don't feel like now, based on their 2 encounters in this series, that now lines up well. So, I mean, that's
Really?
old 1977 canon. I don't think this left off as a master and apprentice type of situation. Even if Vader lost in the second fight, I don't feel that it set up that dynamic of master versus learner, especially considering Obi-Wan got his butt kicked the first time they fought. So I don't feel like it really set up a master apprentice type of relationship in that last fight to say, well, that still kind of lines up with that line in the 1977 movie.
So you were really hung up on that particular statement throughout the series, leading up to it, during it, and I was waiting for them to fulfill everything you wanted out of that line, and I feel like it wasn't. Like, I don't think it took away from it. I don't
feel like they did enough in that second fight sequence to establish back to that line again. Only for, I think, diehard fans who really liked that scene and that, and thought about that scene in the original movie, is it going to be a problem? Most everyone else is going to probably love it because that last fight sequence was done really well. It weakens the fight in 1977 movie because we've now had 2 awesome fights between Vader, basically Anakin and Obi-Wan. And so the 1977 fight sequence really seems lame in comparison. So,
well, I mean, let's be honest. After the prequels, it seemed kind of lame if we're talking just from visually and choreography, right. Sure. But I think thematically and some of the character motivations, I think it adds some extra weight. Even that particular fight, the fact that Obi-Wan still basically had Vader's number in this case. He came with the sole purpose of allowing their new hope to escape, but also sacrificing himself in the end and still one-upping him in doing so. Coming back to quote-unquote haunt him in a way and live on. Like, I don't know. I don't know that... I hear what you're saying. I don't know that line...
when I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
I didn't really think about it a ton. I mean, I knew it, but I wasn't... once you were fixated on it and talking to me about it, I certainly did. And I felt fairly satisfied.
It's not the only plot hole, though, that they kind of created with this, right? And when I go back to the 1977 film, and when you look at Leia's message to Obi-Wan,
right,
it doesn't come across as any way like I'm sending a message to someone who's an old friend who I now know very familiarly from when I was 10 years old. He saved my life. I almost feel like that would have been what would have been in the message. 9 years ago, you saved my life. And now I ask you to help again. That would have been the message instead of General Kenobi, you served my father during the Clone Wars. And now he begs you to help again. It felt
See, now, I know what you're saying, but you're getting into some tangled territory here because Obi-Wan did say, like, basically, we can never acknowledge that you ever knew me. You know what I mean? Like, she was telegraphing something out there, literally, and probably was, you could argue, right, that she didn't want it to be that obvious, didn't want anyone to know that they'd had that interaction. It may have was trying to put on a front, so to speak, in her message.
I'll let that one go as that, right? And I think, because that would work well with the whole idea that when Luke takes off the helmet and says, "I've got your droids, I'm here with Ben Kenobi," she understands who Ben Kenobi is.
I've got your R2 unit, I'm here with Ben Kenobi.
Ben Kenobi, where is he?
Come on.
Right? Because she addressed him as Obi-Wan Kenobi. He was always known as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I felt like that was one of the plot holes that they actually filled in, was that idea of why would she even know him as Ben Kenobi to begin with?
Ultimately name her child Ben, which it maybe adds a little bit more significance to it in that regard.
I agree. I do felt the series dragged at certain times from a story, and I think that's where when you said that, could this have been better as a movie? I feel like it's almost an in-between. I feel like it's almost a 4-episode show instead of a 2-hour movie or a 6-episode show.
Yeah, you had a lot of moving parts. We had to tell a little bit about Leia and tell her story to a degree in order to give some weight to what Obi-Wan was doing. And then you've also got these new characters, particularly Reva, who's entering the mix. And I can appreciate that, especially if we're doing a series. Why not add some other faces into this, obviously in true Star Wars fashion, and Disney fashion for that matter. You add new faces into a story that gives you an opportunity to use those properties for other things down the road. Sure. If you're going to give me a show called Obi-Wan Kenobi, I want to know what are we bridging the gap with what he was doing during his time on Tatooine, and what was Vader doing? Give me that. And for the most part, they did. The major beats I appreciated, but when we talk about, again, series versus feature-length film, I couldn't help but think that as we progressed through, and especially that last episode, which for the most part I enjoyed, and I felt as though, oh, this is the third act of a movie. Like, maybe we could have done one. I don't know.
I think there were a lot of elements to it that were, neat to see. And there was obviously some cameos, right? You had, at the very end, you had the Emperor and Qui-Gon, right? That both showed up. I actually would have preferred if we maybe had seen him talking to Qui-Gon a few times throughout the series. I actually would have loved a conversation with Qui-Gon about the fate of Anakin.
I will agree with you on that
Qui-Gon is the one who, right? Since Qui-Gon's the one who asked him to train Anakin, I would have loved to have seen a conversation with them about it, And I think episode 3 set that up, like, oh, I'm gonna, Yoda's like, I'm gonna teach you how to commune with Qui-Gon type of deal, and then it took him 10 years to actually be able to do it. And we only get that brief little cameo. That Obi-Wan, Force voice that we had at the end of episode 4, I almost would have liked to have heard something like that from Qui-Gon right before he goes and fights Anakin.
Yeah, I felt like at the end of the day with this Qui-Gon thing, it was so hyped up. And the idea of Liam Neeson coming back, and, even if you take that out of the picture, for him to just kind of appear at the end, it almost felt like an afterthought. And I know that was sort of the goal, was sort of this capstone to all of this, and sure, but I felt like there really was no substance to it other than, I suppose, that he was embracing who he was, which is a Jedi, and now he can kind of have the clarity and can see Qui-Gon again. Sure, I guess.
I really appreciated the conversation that was had at the end of the fight and that last episode between Anakin and Obi-Wan, where
Yes.
Anakin is just like, you didn't kill Anakin. I did. Because he did. He became Vader before they ever fought.
I loved it. I loved that dialogue back and forth. I always loved the dynamic between Obi-Wan and Anakin during the prequels, particularly in episode 3.
Episode 3, yes. Episode 2, no. But
Sure,
episode 3,
right.
yes.
But it was almost like you got this extra epilogue of their dialogue back and forth, and you got closure, and it was executed, again, from a script standpoint, much better. And the idea of giving Obi-Wan some level of, we'll call it closure, knowing that, hey, look, there's really not much else you could have done here. You've been living this life of regret, and sorrow. And while it is sad, he's not Anakin anymore. And you could have spelled that out a number of ways on screen and on paper. And ultimately, I was very satisfied with what they ended up with in that particular scene. If there's anything I would ever think about when I think about this series, it's really that particular moment. If I ever recommend it to people.
That, and honestly, if you are a Darth Vader fan, almost every scene leading up to that last episode was pure Darth Vader's a badass. Whether
Darth Vader,
he's pulling a ship down, he's stopping lightsabers with the Force, whatever the case is.
Fighting without a lightsaber completely, yeah.
Right. He was a complete badass all the way up,
still unhinged,
even in that
though.
last fight. Right. Obi-Wan is like a weak point in him. And I think that flashback scene they even showed where they were sparring and Anakin just kind of gets ahead of himself in his quest to beat his master. I think, that scene ends up playing very pivotally on why somebody who was such a badass to all these other people, he's a little bit unhinged and not as clear in his fights when he's fighting Obi-Wan because it's personal and he can't get past that personal. And they even showed that when he's then talking to the Emperor and the Emperor starts questioning, like, are we clear on your feelings on this? Obviously Vader has to say he means nothing to me now. He's lying because he does, and I think that ties even into episode 4 where I must face him alone because it's always been personal between them two.
Of course, naturally, and we could blame Ewan McGregor for this and also Hayden Christensen. There's talks of, hey, would you do a second season of this show? Would you do more of this character? And of course, they're very interested. Oddly enough, directors, Kathleen Kennedy, they're like, yeah, this was always going to be one thing. But my question, and the thing that I've wondered myself is, would I want to see more of these characters? Maybe not in a second season per se of Obi-Wan. I would be very interested in telling a complete side, non-related to what ultimately we see in episode 4. I wouldn't mind like a one-off Vader story of him just wreaking havoc and learning how to actually reach the peak of his powers. I just want to see him causing trouble in the galaxy. I'm open to that.
I mean, I'm open if you're going to keep playing in this time frame and you decide to do some other story that happens in that time frame to get cameos from Vader and stuff like that, just being Vader and being badass. Sure.
But you don't want it centered on Vader.
I think he works better if he just throughout the story comes in just being a badass, being Vader, just wiping the floor with people like what we enjoy seeing. They've already proven this. Sometimes when they decide people like this character, let's do a whole series or let's dive into this character more and do a movie, whatever the case may be, they sometimes do a disservice. I mean, the Book of Boba Fett did a huge disservice to the character of Boba Fett. The Han Solo movie was horrible for the character of Han Solo, in my opinion. So I worry about centering a series or something else project around Vader. But, look, him popping up in Rogue One, him showing up when he did in this series, all worked. Kathleen Kennedy has already said that if the fans want more, I know. I don't want it to be based on fans. Yes, this did well. I think they run a greater risk of trampling the connectivity of going into episode 4 if they do more. If I had
a sort of final thought, if I were to wrap things, I do want to point out that I feel like we've been far too kind to this series, believe it or not. But I will say that everything I've said up to this point, I stand by. I enjoyed it overall. The story I wanted to see, I got it mostly in episode 6. But I will leave with the thought of and this is a larger concern of the series as we move forward, because it seems as though Disney's very keen on doing more of their Disney Plus content. Obviously, we have not seen a feature-length film since Rise of Skywalker, and everything that we've ever seen announced, it may or may not ever happen at this point. So with that said, I have concerns about some of the quality of what happened in this series, particularly from a directing cinematography standpoint. At times, how do I put this? It felt very backlot and not sort of the epic saga that I expect a Star Wars sort of event to be. Something about it felt more in a bubble. But we can even talk all day about the shaky cam that drove me nuts at times and the way they did certain logical sequences. And so it's that kind of thing. And so we talk bigger picture moving forward. I have concerns.
I also have concerns. I think this is one of the issues I even had with the end of Rise of Skywalker, is I think sometimes in order to try and make the lightsabers pop more, they end up making the scene too dark. I kind of want to personally just take this episode and adjust the lighting on it and make things just kind of the details pop a little bit more. It made Vader's lights pop out more. It made the lightsabers pop out more. And I think that's what they were going for. But I think overall, it just kind of did a disservice to that fight scene a little bit by trying to cater to that. And that's just a stylized type of nitpick about that scene.
I hear what you're saying. They probably could have done it a different way. I did appreciate the lighting in that particular scene off the lightsabers, though. The way that they kind of bounced back and forth and they changed it at one point on who, I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, it was a bit suffocating. Almost felt like you had like 3 layers of filters over the thing or something. But I don't really want Deborah Chow doing any more Star Wars shit. Let's just leave it at that. I mean, like, I got nothing against her. But she doesn't have much of a history of doing anything that great, in my opinion. And that goes for, I can't remember his name now, the writer of this. The guy wrote Army of the Dead. He didn't do a whole lot. And there were times where I just felt like at the end of the day, he scraped by. He didn't completely screw anything up, but I don't know what Disney's doing. It's like they're hiring, or Lucasfilm for that matter, they're hiring people that are trendy names, I suppose. Directors that catch fire and catch a break and get lucky. Colin Trevorrow and all this, and then they bail. And it's like, I feel like they can't make up their minds on how they're going to, like, please don't lose Taika Waititi. At this point, I'm worried he's just going to say, creative differences and move on as well.
And that's why on every project they announce, my attitude is until they actually start filming, it's all speculation. It's all rumor until they actually start filming. I'm good. Like, don't do any more. And I'm fine with this series having existed. Let's not poison the well by dwelling on this stuff too much. So let's move away. New characters, new planets, new stories. Let's go that direction.
Well, you're in luck, Adam, because we're only mere months away from Andor.
God, I know.
Overall, I've enjoyed it. In the long run, in the grand scheme of things, will I go back and look at this as a critical component or something I'm going to revisit regularly in the world of Star Wars? My initial impression is probably not. But maybe that'll change. It maybe in true Star Wars fashion, something else will come out that will be so poorly done that this will look amazing in comparison. And then I will look back in hindsight and be like, well, that was so great. Let's watch that again. I don't know.
I will say one final thought I do want to say is the actress who played little young Leia. I thought she did a really good job.
Yeah, I agree.
I think she did great. She was kind of a standout of playing this kind of bossy, strong version of little Leia. I was good with her as an actress playing this character. So I did want to kind of throw that out there, since she was kind of a newcomer to this. We had a lot of familiar faces, but she was kind of the standout newcomer. She did definitely, I thought, do a good job, other than the chase scene.
And the young actor that played Luke did a great job in that all he had to do was be there, and he was there.
Yeah. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of this series? Are there any series you'd like to see spawn from this one? Do you want to see another season of this? Let us know in the comments down below. And as always, this is Adam and Andrew with It Takes Two Takes.